Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Derry Girls, Season 3, Episode 3. In this episode, all our friends want to do is have a little holiday down at the seaside at an amusement park, but the whole trip down is quite complicated, and once they get there, it doesn't seem like things really improved for them all that much. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. I really did enjoy this one because there are times where I feel like I can sort of see where things are going with the show, and this one was full of surprises. I had in the first episode when they find out from Sister Michael that she already has her test results. My first thought was, oh, obviously they have to burgle the school now, right? That's where it's going. And this episode, I just, from moment to moment, was genuinely like, what? Oh, wait, what? So this episode, we start off with Mary, and I love this. She is making sandwiches. And when I say she is making sandwiches, I really don't feel it gets across the extent to which the packaging of these sandwiches is, they're wrapped in tinfoil, but each package is about the thickness of a brick. And I don't know if that is because there's a bunch of only bread. And there's I can't tell how much of it is supplies to make sandwiches and how much it's already made. But regardless, it's about 6 or 7 packages that she's loading into this cooler. And I love when Jerry is like, it's only an hour train ride. She says, oh, better do a few more rounds. And he has to stop her. And it's for the love of God. Look, as somebody who frequently makes way too much food for the number of people present, I just really understand, especially the fact that they apparently agreed that they weren't going to do this, but she found a reason to kind of get around that. There's a loophole, because she's saying this isn't for the trip itself. We're not going to have these at the beach as a picnic, but for the ride down, we need some sustenance. And oh my God, am I ever guilty of this? It's a really hard thing to unlearn, both over planning and continually taking responsibility for everybody in a way that's not helpful or healthy or even necessary a lot of the time. So I just really sympathize with her here. And Joe has got himself a surfboard. And it's got, first of all, a shamrock on it, which is delightful. But also, when Jerry presses him what the deal is, he says that he's always wanted to go surfing ever since watching that movie. And I love that it takes ages to get to the fact that he is talking about Jaws. That is the movie that made him want to learn to surf. And this is what I love about Joe. Joe makes no fucking sense. There are times where he's brilliant and he's focused and he's, and then there are times where I'm you really do have a little bit of what Orla's got going on with you, Joe. I can see where Orla got it from. It's been distilled as time has gone on and generations. But nevertheless, I really like these reminders. Joe is he is not always the voice of reason. which it would be very easy to put him in that role. Jerry is mostly the voice of reason, to be fair, but Joe is a wild card. Sometimes he's really smart and on top of shit, and sometimes he just decides to completely ignore reality, and I support that. That's great. So then we have Sarah coming in these, by the way, adorable pajamas. I want them. Just have to say this. They are that like turquoise Tiffany blue background, and they are decorated with pineapples, bananas, I think strawberries, and slices of watermelon with like this pink piping. I need these. I do not know. Like, there are frequent times where I see clothing on TV that I'm just like, oh, that's really cute. This is more than that. I feel those were stolen from me. Personally, like those were mine and she took them. Why don't I have them? Give them back. I love them. So anyway, she's trying to get ready and she has noticed that one of her ears has closed over. And y'all, this is a real problem. I have had this. I have, piercings all the way up my ears, and no, I don't. Not anymore. I used to. I think I had like 3 or 4 on one side, and then I think I had 3 on each, and then I had the cartilage on one side. And one day, like a few years ago, I thought I would be really cute and get one of those like super cheap packs of earrings that has like 10 pairs and go all the way up my cartilage again. And it did not work out. It was just not going to happen. It's very disappointing to find out that can still, like, even when the piercing has healed correctly, you did everything right, that it can still do that. I just think that's not really very fair. So Sarah has decided that she is going to freeze one of her earlobes with an ice cube and just shove a needle through it. And I know this sounds horrifying, but I have to admit there is a big part of me that respects her for this. I kind of want to do that too. Now that I'm seeing her do it, even though I know taking any advice or following anything that Sarah does is extremely poor judgment, I'm like, oh, Sarah, you kind of got me thinking maybe I could pull this off actually. Because I know that this is a very obvious thing, but it had never occurred to me to just try and freeze my ear first before doing it. I have always just tried to shove the earring through, just like cold turkey. And not surprisingly, it often did not work. There's been a couple times where I managed it, and I'm pretty sure it wound up healing over again anyway, because if you do shove it through again, you've got to take care of it again as if it were a new piercing, and I don't. I shove it through for the one day I'm going to be wearing that earring, and then I take it out and it just closes up again. So yeah, I think that I should try this, and everybody, I'm going to keep you posted on how that goes. And I also think that she should really take off those adorable pajamas before she gets blood all over them. Just a thought for me. So then we have Orla coming in, and I fucking love, she has these blue sparkly boots, like knee boots with silver stars up the sides. And I really want more wild fashion choices from Orla like this. I like it. She's always a bit of a weirdo, but her clothing tends to be somewhat nondescript unless it's like in the context of whatever's happening, particularly silly in relation to what's happening. But this is just like, and she loves them, and everybody's like, are those actually appropriate? And she says that there are height restrictions for the ride she wants to go on and she won't risk it. And I'm like, girl, you are literally taller than everyone here. I think she's taller than Joe. If she's not, she's the second tallest. I mean, come on. She doesn't have to worry about it. But anyway, this is when we get this moment on the news about the IRA like agreeing to decommission their arms. And this is just delightful. So what Sarah says she thinks is that they don't want to admit they have lost track of a lot of their weapons and stuff. And so they can't decommission them because they don't have them. And this is like, I won't exactly say it's backed up by Mary. It seems like Mary just sort of hears the example and explains how she understands what Sarah means, but it does kind of come across as if Mary is agreeing with her sister, which I do not think is actually what's happening. But it is, I thought later on when we have the encounter with this bag that has money and a gun in it, I thought that was going to be related to this, because like the show does, they do like some political involvement stuff within the direct plot. And I thought maybe this was going to be a thing, but no. And then I love how the whole way that this ends is her saying, I can't believe this. And I love Jerry saying, well, let's just hope they can work it out. And she says, I froze the wrong lobe. Ah, Sarah, what a precious angel you are. I love her so much. Her little pigtails. I mean, come on. So apparently the place they're going, which is called Portrush, we see from the film James is taking later, it has a Protestant Unionist majority. And he says many Catholics from Derry risk traveling there every summer. And can I just say, he zeroes in on Joe for part of this. And Joe, I had expected him to be saucy about having the camera in his face and just be kind of like, what are you doing? And no, Joe is like bouncing with his eyebrows up like a little kid. And this is comedy, people. You take what I expect and you just invert it a little bit. So instead, Joe is excited and delighted, and Sarah is the one who doesn't want to be on film because she hasn't put her makeup on yet. And honestly, that makes a ton of sense, and it just works. And I really was just caught by surprise because everybody else is actually very on board with being filmed. And I forget, I think, how it was very unusual to be filmed because we didn't have all like the cameras all over the place. So it was an exciting thing that you'd participate in as a bit of a joke and, for posterity, and you'd be a lot more good natured about it. And nowadays people would react differently in a lot of ways, I think, because we're kind of sick of this sort of thing. And that's not to say that people would be outright grumpy about it, but it makes sense why there's like a sort of feeling of effervescence here. And there's like a moment where Michelle starts laughing where they're talking about the rides. And it turns out it's just because they're saying the word rides, which that was a beautiful, stupid joke. And I love Mary has to tell Aaron she does not want to deal with Aaron after the haunted train ride. So she's not going to let her go on it. And Aaron tries to protest because apparently there's a fellow without a head at the end of the ride. And she got caught very off guard and then wound up like not being able to sleep that night. And later on, we do see her with her mother on the train and she is freaking out. And it seems pretty much to me like Mary is regretting that she said that she could come. So anyway, then we have this moment where the train is pulling up and they hear that it will be at platform 2, and they look and realize that they are at the wrong platform and go sprinting to the other side. And this is a nice little Home Alone moment. It's a kind of like a fun, like summer Home Alone bit. Because they are in a rush and we're on the wrong side, they almost miss the train and they have to sprint over this bridge that goes over the tracks. And in this rush, they failed to notice that poor Claire is in the bathroom and missed the train. So when they get on, Mary is saying like, grab these seats right in front of us, girls, because we should all be staying together. And Erin says we don't all need to be supervised, Ma. We want our own space. And this is when she asks, where's Claire? And we see Claire in this fucking getup, y'all. It's so perfect that she was Baby Spice. Like, truly. She's got these horrible flowered overalls. And this is one of those things where I say they're horrible, but they kind of slap. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a really fine line between something being ugly and being fashionable a lot of the time. And I feel like it's something that we don't like to admit the ugly part. We talk about things being fashion. And if you suggest that, oh, actually that's ugly, it's you admitting to being like a Philistine with no taste. But to be fair, a lot of fashion, when you're talking about peak, not even necessarily haute couture, because that is like unwearable, but I'm talking about like if you're really doing like a statement outfit, a lot of the time there are parts of it that are just like, oh God, no. And this is one of those things that I personally struggle with, because I really like things to always be beautiful. And thus, I am not actually fashionable when I do fashion. Not like right now when I'm literally wearing an apron on camera because I forgot to take it off because I was with the dogs. So I have a friend whose name is Lace. And if any of you want to follow her on Instagram, I'm sure she'd be delighted. Her username is thickgirl69 with the I in thick replaced with a Y and the I in girl replaced with a U. She's a delight. And she is one of those people that understands the ugly line in fashion. And she rides that line. And her outfits are always like, oh God. Like, I hate it, but also it looks amazing. I don't know how she does it. So all this to say, what the overalls that Claire is wearing here, I hate them, but I could also see this being like a signature look that Drew Barrymore wore to, some fucking like event. And she's got a similarly, because the overalls being floral, it's like a pink and green and white, and it's a pastel. She's got a pink and green and white pastel striped denim jacket over it all, which really, that is just too much. I can't. And the fact that they're wearing these outfits, full clothing, they have got shorts on sometimes, but they still have like multiple layers on, and they're going to the beach. I like forget about this sometimes. Having moved down to Texas, the fucking beach in like the Northeast that I would go to is freezing cold. And that's part of being at the beach. The water is icy and you are broiling on the beach in the sun. And then you have to decide whether you want to continue broiling or if you want to freeze to death. And so when I had gone to the beach down here in Texas and it was like, honestly, lukewarm, the ocean, I was just so thrown off because you can just walk right into it immediately. There's no need to do the like inching in. And I realized like, oh, this is like what it feels to be at like a tropical beach. This is the real thing. So I am assuming that England has the same beaches. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, everybody. Ireland. I'm going to say the island has the same beach experience that New England does. See, I said England because I wanted to do the England versus New England thing, but I really should have just never. And that you have to work yourself up to it, that the beach is much more like the experience of being there over the swimming. And yes, you bring all your stuff, and yes, maybe you go in the water, but it's not really like the thing to, that's my assumption. I'd be interested to hear. So poor Claire comes running out and she looks around and realizes what happened. And as she does, she completely loses her shit and begins to scream. And y'all, if there is worse person to be left behind, I can't think. Claire is so anxious all the time. For this to have happened to her just feels particularly cruel. And when we go to the train, I really kind of love the fact that Aaron is being so dramatic about how they left Claire behind. I know that it's too much, and that, like, as James points out, it's not like Claire is dead. She'll just get the next train and we'll be fine. But being left behind is much more about the fact that nobody noticed than it is about the inconvenience of it, you know? So I appreciate that Erin is taking it seriously in a way that feels like she's considering how it would feel, and nobody else is really seeing it that way. I have to also mention, because, you know, we talk in the background a lot of the time about how Orla is up to some weird shit. And in this scene, I don't know if anybody else noticed this, and I will tell you what I thought was happening here. Orla is sniffing the end of her own braid because she's got, I think, pigtails, or maybe it's just like the one French braid. And she's sniffing her hair, and then she's sniffing the hair of her mother, who is sitting with her back to them, and comparing them. And I'm thinking maybe she's comparing, like, the shampoos they use and the smell of their hair. And then I realized that is not her mother. That is just some woman who is just unknowingly being sniffed at by a weird teenage girl who is making a comparison for reasons unknown. And the fact that this lady is nobody makes this so much creepier. It is, this actress, I like to think, comes up with these bits of business on her own, that it's not in the script. But either way, it's genius, and it's just so uncomfortable. Once it, like, registered for me what was actually happening, I just couldn't. So this is when we get the snack trolley, and everybody wants a Kit Kat, which I have to ask, was this product placement? Because I feel like it must be. Nevertheless, I love a Kit Kat. I'll just say, any candy bar that has some kind of wafer or cookie in it is going to be number one in my book. And that's also Twix. Fucking love me some Twix. And this man who is running the snack trolley, what a great bit. This show has decided that every service person they are going to deal with in any sense is going to be a nightmare. So we have him sort of taking the place of, I can't remember his name, but the one that is in the video store this season and had been in the convenience store the other season. And he is really, what's the word I want? Combative. Because they want Kit Kats, and the only Kit Kat he has left is a display Kit Kat, because they don't actually have any in the drawers. And when they say, well, then if you don't have any, why don't you take it down? He's like, well, then how will people know they're available? And they're like, well, they're not available. And he says, exactly. And the whole thing just makes my head explode. But the thing that I really enjoy about this is, having worked, and like, I'm sure people who have done this kind of work know what I'm talking about. Having worked a service job, and we don't like to talk about this because we want to pretend that the customers are always the monsters. And to be fair, that is the truth, 90% of the time at least. However, because of that, because the fucking customers are monsters so much of the time, you can start to get deeply resentful to a point where even people asking for something totally reasonable makes you want to slap and shake them. And it's not like, I remember feeling this happening at certain jobs I had and recognizing that the rage I was feeling towards a particular person wasn't fair, that they weren't asking me to do anything other than my actual job, and that the fact that they were calling out something being empty or not being correct was my fault or the fault of the people on staff with me, and that it wasn't them being too demanding. But I was so fucking over it that even though what they were asking was reasonable, I just wanted to dig my heels in anyway and wanted to make it a big fucking problem. And I didn't necessarily make it so every time, but there were times where, looking back, I realized that I should have just capitulated immediately. And instead I sort of tried to like put like obstacles in the way of them getting what they wanted, saying that it was going to be a long wait, even if there wasn't really going to be a wait, just to try and get them to drop it. Or I'm not sure if we have any left, or anything like that, where it was, if I had just gone ahead and done it, it would have taken 2 seconds and it would have been fine. But because I was fucking cranky and my job was a ball breaker, this poor person who rolled up at the wrong time during a day that was shitty already, I took it out on them. And in the end, they get what they want anyway, you know, at least with me. And there's not really any satisfaction if they don't get what they want anyway. So there was no real point. But it was this very petty part of me that would come out. And this is what I'm assigning to this actor in this role, is that he as a character is not able to wield his power over anybody usually. But this is a group of fucking teenagers with no real buying power of their own, no real social clout either. There's no feeling of, I need to mind myself around them. They're fucking kids. And so he can be a snot to them. If they were even a little bit younger, maybe he wouldn't, because when you get too young, then it starts to be that you're the asshole. But I feel like they fall right into this nice spot where you can go off on a power trip a little bit and not really feel bad about it. And there not be like necessarily any big consequences for it. So this dude is just like the sort of antagonist of this entire episode. And the guy that they cast has this very like soft face that is giving priggish, even though I feel like it's rude to say that about a face, but people get cast because of their faces. And I feel like that's definitely part of why the casting director chose this guy. Like, come on. So there's just a whole sense of him seeming to me like the type of person who is going to always wield power over, like he's the hall monitor at his school kind of thing, you know. He just feels like somebody who has this pettiness, and he chooses roles where he can exercise that often. And when, I love this, Aaron is saying like, you're the train manager and you operate the snack trolley, and I love Michelle says, and you also drive the train, and he says, sometimes I own the trains. I own all the trains. So at this point, the dude that's sitting behind James, who has a pair of headphones on, and he's like in this muscle tank that's showing quite a lot of chest hair and a gold chain, turns around and says, Jesus Christ, really loud, and grabs a bag and moves further down the train. And what we find out later is that he took James's bag. So James goes to get his bag down, and it turns out it is full of money and a gun and a bag of crisps, which is very important. And they all begin to freak out. And Erin, being the voice of reason, and she isn't always, but here she's like, put it back and act like you never saw it. We cannot let him know we touched it or know what's in it. 100%. 100%. You just don't, like, it's wild to think too about a world in which there aren't metal detectors to get onto transportation anymore. Like, maybe this could go on a bus, maybe this like whole bit, but on trains today, I don't know, maybe in the UK it's different, but here in the US, it doesn't matter you're going to be going through metal detectors, you know? Anyway, so this, let's double back and talk about Claire here. There is a woman sitting at the desk in the train station, and she is on the phone with someone she clearly wants to be an ex-boyfriend who is not really taking it well that she has dumped him. And his name is Connor. I don't know if we ever find out what her name is. I'll try and keep an eye out on her name tag here. But, oh, she's not wearing one. Nope, don't have it. Sorry. But Claire is her usual absolutely panicked, shrieking self. And this lady says to, like, get her knickers out of a twist, which of course offends Claire. But then she explains there's another train in 10 minutes. And Claire immediately sort of simmers down and is like, oh, 10 minutes. Oh, I can wait 10 minutes, or it's 20 minutes. My bad. Oh my God. I have to mention too that Claire, I didn't notice this until just now, has all of these butterfly clips in her hair. Bless her. Those were such a thing, you guys. I had forgotten. And every time I see them, I'm like, I really shouldn't have tried wearing those because with curly hair, the tangle, like, forget it. But, she turns around to wait, and there's Sister Michael with her bag. And I love the expression on her face because she fucking knows now she's going to have to interact and she is not interested. And what happens with Claire here is that she basically, like, sort of eventually tries to talk to Sister Michael, and Sister Michael won't engage with her. And Claire is a chatterbox because of her anxiety, right? So she's having real, like, a time with the fact that she can't make conversation and that she has to awkwardly sit there. But what happens is this woman who works at the desk sort of comes to their rescue inadvertently by talking about things that, like, so loudly with Connor on the phone that it fills the air and they don't need to talk to each other. Now, don't get me wrong. Claire does not see this as the woman saving her because this woman is talking explicitly about sex in front of Sister Michael, who I think that Claire has this vibe that Sister Michael is, like, the exact wrong person to be talking about this stuff in front of and, like, how awkward it is. But honestly, Sister Michael to me seems like a very worldly woman who knows all about all of this stuff. So this woman is talking to Connor about why they broke up because he won't accept it. And she says that he never sexually satisfied her, which I don't think I have ever had the courage to say to a dude because frankly, that's how you get murdered, but very admiring that she has done it. And explains about a friend of hers who gets up to it in all kinds of ways, and that you and I only just did, it was always missionary, and that her friend even, like, she tied, like, she says somebody's name at one point, Mark, let's say, and she's like, she would tie Mark up even. I would love to do that. And then there's a pause and she says, no, I don't want you to tie me up. I want to tie Mark up. He's hot. And I swear to God, the energy of this lady just being like, you suck in bed and there's another guy I would rather be fucking. What a hero. I mean, truly, that is just goals for me to be able to be that, like, straightforward because I just, oh, bless her. So eventually, they hear the announcement that the train is coming up to the platform. And Sister Michael walks up to her and says, listen, I have to say something. And I know that you're going to say that this is none of my business. But this is just absolutely beautiful, you guys. I am so into it. The soundproofing here is atrocious. you need to speak to the lad who did our confessionals. They're great. There, fellas, telling Father Peter where they stashed the murder weapon, and the congregation is none the wiser. I'll drop his number into you. And I love this woman, like, sort of being confused and it seeming to register finally that they have heard everything she said. And also Claire, who is sitting there, like, expecting Sister Michael to say something about her morality. And then it's just her being like, you really need better construction. You need a different contractor, and we'll hook you up with somebody. And just how completely off guard this catches her. It's great. I love it. So I feel like that's pretty much it with Claire for this episode. So let's go over to Mary and Sarah and Jerry and Joe. This woman comes in and recognizes Mary and Sarah and is so excited to see them. And the two of them go along, as you do, pretending they know who she is. And they don't remember her, have no idea where they know her from. And because the interaction is only going to take about a minute, they don't tell her they don't remember her, because what would be the point? They're not going to see her for a minute anyway, so it's fine. And this is one of those things that I feel so mixed about. Like, there are times where saying that you don't remember somebody is really, really hurtful. And then there are times where I feel like, no, go ahead. It's fine. You know? So anyway, the way this goes, I'm going to jump to the end here. This girl, this woman, who is an actress that I definitely recognize from somewhere, but I didn't look up where, she did some time inside. I think they said like 10 years. And when she went in, she was really heavy. So when she lost all of this weight and came out, she was basically unrecognizable. And she tries, like, she's very offended at the fact that they don't recognize her. But I have to be honest, weight really does change your whole face. Like, especially depending on how much weight and the way that your body is built and where you put weight on and off, not recognizing somebody because of the weight after having not seen them for over a decade is very reasonable to me. So her being really offended, I was just like, girl, get over yourself. It's fine. Like, and also it's interesting because in a very fat phobic society, which is the one that we live in, but today we are attempting to be a lot more body positive than we used to be. And this era, anybody being told their weight loss made them unrecognizable, I have to think would actually be seen as a compliment. You know, it's the kind of thing that, like, she's trying to be like, oh, my smile is the same. And I'm just like, girl, no, it's not though. Like, it's just not. Your face changes. And depending on how much weight you lose, and it sounds like it was a couple 100 pounds, that's a big change. Ashleigh is saying Aideen is the woman's name. Oh, Ashleigh is sick. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what you'd recognize her from. Maybe Doctor Who. That might be. There's also, like, you know, I watched like Midsummer Murders, and pretty much every British actor ever has been on at least one episode of Midsummer Murders. So this woman, it turns out, I don't remember if we find out exactly what her crime was, but because they don't know who she is, she's referring to things that went wrong in her life and saying it's probably what I deserve. I'm sure that's what everyone's saying, isn't it? And both Mary and Sarah are sort of looking at each other like, oh God, like, how do we respond to this? We don't know. Later on, she's like, I'm sure you're dying to ask me about it. Go ahead, just ask me. And all of it, come to find out, is just related to whatever caper she did. And she's telling them that, like, she changed and that now she's going to do some good. And, oh, Ashley's saying, oh, she's not British. She's a dub. Apologies. See, earlier I said England and I really caught myself, but then I called her British and I was just, what am I going to learn, Ashleigh? truly. Like, this is not the show to make that mistake. It's embarrassing. It's very embarrassing. So she evidently, because she, like, I'm back and I'm going to do some good, but she's got a bag of money and a gun. What good are you doing, girl? What are you up to? What is it? What is it? Like, I just genuinely, is she part of the IRA? Is that what's happening? Is it? Is that her doing some good? Because I don't totally disagree with that, to be frank. Like, I mean, girl, okay. But I just love this in respect to the fact that Ashleigh's saying yep to the IRA thing, Ashleigh, because that was how I took it. And I especially wanted to take it that way because of the fact that she loses track of her bag. And she doesn't know that she's like actually lost it. It gets lost and replaced before she realizes it. However, she has asked this random dude to watch her bag for her. And considering what Sarah was saying earlier in the episode with like, oh, they're refusing to disarm because they straight up don't know where their shit is. They've misplaced it all. It just felt so appropriate. It was so perfectly done. Just being like, well, yeah, you know, sometimes like not everybody is out there taking this shit super seriously. Some people are idiots who go on a train and give their bag of money to a random fucking stranger to watch out for. And I really love this. Like, what a great way to end this joke off. It's just... So anyway, the whole thing with the bag, what winds up happening here, because I swear to God, fucking Orla. So Orla, they're trying to like replace the bag so that this dude who they think it belongs to won't notice it was gone. But Orla already took the bag of potato chips out of it and ate them in the midst of their conversation about how they can't make it look like anything has been touched. And they're thinking, quite rightly in my opinion, maybe just putting it back without the potato chips in it, and maybe they won't notice right away. Like, but no, while they're doing this, Orla gets up, and I swear, this bitch, she is such a liability. She goes to the fucking dude who has the trolley dolly, they call him. She goes to the trolley dolly, and she offers him $500. Quid? It's not pounds. Is it? It's pounds. It's not euros. I don't remember. But whatever it is, 500 for the display Kit Kat. And it takes a minute for everybody to like realize what she bribed him with, because she's being very cagey and saying like everybody's got their price in this way that is so, it's just so like knowing and smug, and considering how completely inept she is, I just want to strangle her. Ashleigh is in the chat saying defo working for the IRA. Guns aren't common here. Licensing is really strict. Gangland crime wouldn't be a thing here for another few decades, so definitely the RA. Okay, gotcha. So they go to this dude and demand the money back. And we have a scene that I don't know what to make of. I truly don't. Because Orla threatens him and says, you don't know who you're messing with. And everybody thinks she's going to pull out the gun, since she's been very free with the contents of that bag up until this point anyway. And instead she pulls out an electric toothbrush. And he responds with like, oh, you think you can threaten me? Which he is interpreting it the way she intends it and not the way it actually is. Which I feel like this is going to be like one of 3 people Orla will ever meet in her life who sees things the way that she sees things. So he responds with, do you think I'm unarmed? and pulls out a banana. I just don't even know what to do with this scene. What is this? What is happening? What? They're not, like, it'd be one thing if he, like, pulled out a tube of toothpaste, like, something related, or, like, it's just two completely random objects that they're each acting like are a thing, and everybody else is confused by it, but then they sort of go along with acting like it's a thing, I think, because they just are like, well, I guess this is what we're doing. So anyway, eventually Michelle tricks him by saying she sees some celebrity from something, and none of that registered for me, because he had done that to her earlier and successfully got the display Kit Kat away from her. So he falls for it. She knocks the banana out of his hands, and they manage to take the monkey back. And the monkey back, I said. You guys. I feel like ever since I adopted these puppies, my brain has just melted. It's not there anymore. It used to be like this little Jell-O mold that was what it's supposed to be. And the stress of dealing with these puppies has risen the temperature in my skull and slowly just melted my brain to the liquid form before Jell-O firms up. And it's just drained out of me over the course of the past, 2 weeks. And now I am operating with this, just couple tablespoons of liquid that they're not up to it. They're not up to it. Oh God. Ashleigh in chat says, I don't know, I can't explain this. If it needed to be said, this isn't an Irishism in any way. It didn't need to be said, I didn't think, but now that you say it isn't, I'm like, I should have wondered that actually. I didn't wonder that. I didn't consider, oh, maybe this is just an Irish thing that I just don't get. But in future, if some shit is just wild, I'm going to try and keep it in mind that might be what's going on. Ashleigh says, is Pippin with you today, by the way? He is not in the room. He is in the yard with his brothers. He had been limping last night, and I got so worried, and I was like, I'm not putting him outside tomorrow with them. But when I woke up, he was fine and sprinting around and playing a ton. And when I tried to keep him out of the yard, he was whining and sitting there, and when they were barking, he was going over and listening, and I was just breaking my heart. So I was like, you know what? Okay, fine. So I put him out there again with him. I am so worried, guys, about when those puppies get homes and he doesn't have them in the yard to play with anymore. It's going to be really hard. There's just so much emotion wrapped up in caring for these guys, and so much cats. It's just, they don't really need you, they need you in a very indirect way. You fill their bowl, you scoop their shit. Otherwise they can take or leave you. But having dogs, it feels different. It's they need you for everything. There's just a sense of dependency that you don't get with cats, and it's overwhelming sometimes. But anyway, I'm sorry. So Orla, they get the money back from this guy. They manage to replace it, but they don't replace the crisps. They have to, what they do is have a beautiful sequence, because he's saying that James is arguing Orla should be the one to put the bag back up in the rack because she's got those boots on, and it makes it a lot easier for her to reach. And then the next scene begins, and we see the boots walking down the aisle of the train. And it's a truly gorgeous little moment, because the way they're walking before you know it's James is a very sort of 1 foot in front of the other catwalk, kind of Tyra Banks teaching a model the first time how to walk. So he's trying to be casual in these fucking boots, and he's replacing the bag, and the train comes to a sudden halt, and he falls in this guy's lap. And when the dude's like, well, what are you doing with that? He's like, oh, I must have fallen when the train started. And the guy's like, oh, okay. Takes the bag and then says, oh, those are some really nice boots. And I just really enjoy this guy being like, well, damn. But mission accomplished. They replaced the bag with the correct one. I sort of wondered if later it was going to turn out that in the confusion, James got it mixed up again and they didn't replace it. But yeah, they they get the bag back in place. But I'm sorry, as I'm watching this, while I record, I have the episode like playing in the background. I just came upon the scene where Claire and Sister Michael are watching this woman talking on the phone, and the way that Sister Michael is like, just like, oh God, as this woman's talking, while Claire is just straight up panicking. It is very good acting. But anyway, so this woman, Aideen, she thanks this man after he brings in her bag and opens it and finds that her packet of crisps is missing. And when I tell you, she loses her entire goddamn mind. And this is one of those things that I can't tell if this is sort of meant to be a bit of a fat joke. Like, she used to be fat, and even though she's lost weight from being in prison, she's still got like the fat girl impulses where she's very protective of her food. Or if it's meant to be that she's very protective of her shit because she was in prison, and that's just your property is your shit and everything has greater value. Either way, I really don't care. I am just here for her going nuclear over this packet of crisps because I feel like it really is. There are just, this is not a person you want walking around with a bag that has a gun in it. This is not a person you want joining an organization that has a penchant for violence. I feel like violence is absolutely warranted in a lot of cases, but you don't want someone like this in the positions to deal that violence out. And considering how warm and friendly she has been, the way the switch flips and the impetus being just the bag of crisps, like, I could see something else that others would consider much more dramatic happening to her and her not having this reaction. It's this specific instance of feeling like somebody went through her shit. She doesn't even say, oh my God, he went in my bag. There's no sense from her of like, maybe my money's missing, or now he knows I have a gun. She doesn't even like, there's just no sense of that for me. It's purely the crisps. That feels like all it is. Yeah, because see, Ashleigh's saying, I took it that she knew someone had been in her bag just generally and might have therefore seen the rest of the contents of her bag. And it's more of a general anxiousness of what else did you see? See, I don't see it that way. I feel like that would be the rational thing. And in that case, I think her behavior would be very different. I really think it is only about the crisps. And the way that she's screaming at James, you owe me a packet of crisps. Like, it feels like purely that's all. She had her plan for her snack when she gets off the train and is waiting for the taxi or whatever, and he fucked it up. And he fucked it up and was sitting right there when she found out it wasn't there and didn't say anything. So this dude is the one that she goes after on the platform and smacks him with her bag. And then he has to be like, no, it's that guy. And because he's putting it together that something's missing and James had the bag. And the whole vibe for me is truly, I can't believe you took my potato chips. This was like, I was looking forward to those all day. And as somebody whose life does really revolve around food, and I'm not even going to try and pretend, I get extremely fucking irritable if anything regarding my plans for the day regarding food gets fucked up. And that's not to say I don't have a sense of spontaneity about eating. But if there is something that I'm looking forward to and I don't get it, either because somebody else ate it or because plans change, I will be so annoyed. And it takes a while for me to like adjust and be cool. Similarly, if I order something and it's one of those things where it's takeout and you get home and you open it and it's like the wrong thing, I will have to fight not to cry. Because I will have been looking forward to it and then I open it and it's either I have to make do and eat this thing that I didn't want, or I now have to go back and deal with like exchanging it and I was ready to eat and I'm hungry and here it is and I can't have it. So anyway, all this to say, if it is her fat girl impulse, I just have to admit that that is a thing and what can you do? But anyway, that whole bit was really funny and I thought, I was so, because like, you know, the whole thing with Mary and Sarah not remembering who she is, they do this thing where Mary figures out who she is finally because of her talking about Tommy and one of the Guess Who, they're playing that game, which is a great bit underscoring what's happening here, which I didn't even really pick up on until just now. But she says, doesn't this guy look like Tommy? And that triggers Mary to remember who she is. And Mary's trying to signal to Sarah. And Sarah is arguing with her about it in front of this woman when she could just go with it. And then this lady wouldn't realize that they never knew who she was. But because Sarah's like arguing and eventually is just like, well, but you know, she could have made 4 of you. Then it's just the cat's out of the bag and it could have been okay, but you had to ruin it. And I have to mention, when Joe meets her, he says that he's suffering from dementia and he has such a hard time with his memory. I thought he was going to utilize that to ask her who she is and help them out by like just pretending it's part of my condition. I'm so sorry, love. I've been having trouble recalling things. Where do I know you from? No. It feels purely like he is putting that thought in her head so that in future, if she asks him something, he can just pretend that's why he doesn't know. But he doesn't try to help anybody else in the situation with this bit, which is a really good idea. Like, you know, it could have worked seamlessly. And I kind of enjoy the fact that he sets up something that was perfect and then just totally doesn't utilize it at all, because that just feels right for him. So anyway, the episode ends with them getting to Portrush, and it's like one of those sort of seaside community things that feels for me like a in better shape, nicer Coney Island. Like this is what Coney Island had been at one time, and now it's the most depressing place in the world. But this is when a place like this would be at its peak. The 90s was a time where this shit would still fucking slap. So they're over here like posing for the camera, getting ready to go on this ride and just really excited about the day. And I mean, this is something that bothered me a lot in the watching of it after, is that they're at the amusement park and they're getting on the rides and Claire is not with them, which the train Claire was gonna take was only 20 minutes after theirs, and their train had a long delay, which is what led to the whole thing with Aideen having to spend more time with them. So I have to imagine that Claire's train was probably right up against theirs. And if they had waited literally 5 minutes, they could have been with her. But they just went ahead to the park without her. Which is like kind of fucked up. Like, what is happening? Ashleigh has an explanation. Filming overlapped with a lot of Bridgerton, so they had to make do without her sometimes. So that's the main reason her character was forgotten in the first place. Okay. So yeah, if they filmed this thing like getting onto the ride, they can film her whole scene, everything totally separate. But I do wish they did give us some like closure for her, because we see her getting on the train, but we don't see her arriving or anything. It's just left open, and then we see them all going off without her. So I wish that we, maybe got a moment where she's like watching them getting into a taxi without her, and she was right behind them trying to catch up, and they just continued to leave her behind. And that way we at least know. But this way, the episode ends with her getting on the train. We know about the delay. Everything was lined up in such a way that it really kind of solved their problem for them. And yet we don't see her at the end. So it just comes across as like very cold-blooded. So, because I feel like that's something that they wouldn't necessarily have needed the others there at the same time as her to film her trying to catch up with them in a crowded, they could have done that in 2 different takes and just edited it together, and it would have worked. But I can also see maybe just not wanting to spend any more time on it. I don't know. But regardless, so they all get onto this ride. I love that there's a moment where James is like taking the film, and Michelle says something about don't forget to catch the point where it goes upside down. And poor Jerry, who is like going on this because he, it feels like he wants to try and be adventurous, but he isn't super psyched. When he hears that it goes upside down, he is just like, what? And they head on up. They're on this roller coaster, and then all of a sudden they come to a slamming stop on the uphill bit. And we get an announcement. There's a technical problem. We're going to have to stall here for the time being. And honestly, as much as like I can understand being stalled on a roller coaster, just in principle, being truly terrible. If you're going to get stuck, this is the part of the roller coaster where you want to get stuck. The part where you're heading upward and you're like positioned in such a way that all of your weight is firmly back in your seat and holding you in a very safe cupped position. This is ideal because there is a lot of places where this could have stopped. And I know that it's supposed to be out so high up. Doesn't matter. This is the safest place for this to happen. So you guys are kind of lucky, because there have been ones where people got stuck upside down. I remember one that I read about. I can't remember if it was like Six Flags or Busch Gardens, but it was a roller coaster that went upside down and people got stuck in the upside down position. I think I read it was for something like 9 hours before they were able to figure out how to get them down, which I truly think is the sort of thing that would just scar you for the rest of your life. Like, I just can't imagine, going upside down in those things. There's always the slight feeling anyway that you're going to fall out, because it's never super like tight enough and close fitting enough to be like it's personalized for you. It's always got some give and some looseness. And to be upside down and have to just, like, the thing is already proving that it doesn't function correctly, and now you have to trust that these restraints are going to hold you, literally kill me. And Owen and I were rewatching some of the Final Destination movies for Halloween, and there's one where something goes wrong on a roller coaster. And I was like, all the Final Destination movies beyond the first one are trash, but I felt like the roller coaster going wrong out of the disasters that happen in each movie was by far the scariest one. And it really, I was sort of like, I wish I hadn't seen this, because, oh my God. But anyway, yeah, Ashleigh in the chat. Oh, Jesus Christ. At that point, I never leave home again. Exactly. So anyway, that is where the episode ends, is them stalled on the Dipper and the camera slowly pulling out as we see that it's like positioned right on the beach and the whole thing. It looks fun. Looks like a fun place. But I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, lots of surprises, lots of unexpected little twists and turns. So this is just such a fun show. I delight in this. Ashleigh in the chat says, I was on one roller coaster a couple of months ago and the restraint came in from the side, but it wasn't supposed to go over both legs. I didn't realize that and genuinely thought I was going to fall out and die the whole time. Oh my God. Yeah, no, thank you. the whole thing with the restraints on these rides, it's kind of crazy that like this sort of thing is allowed, you know? And then like me being fat, I can't even ride a lot of that stuff. And there's a part of me that gets so saucy about it. And then another part of me that's like, well, I mean, what do I want to do? Like push it and make it so that I barely fit. And then something goes wrong. Like, no, thank you. So, anyway, yeah, I have a real love-hate relationship with that stuff. All right, I'm going to wrap up, but thank you again so much for listening. Thank you, Ashleigh, for commissioning this. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.